Hey my friends, how's it going? Hopefully that camera is set up straight. I didn't really check it. This is Carpo here. I'll stick this little leaf under it. There we go. Maybe I'll be able to make a video real quick here. It's kind of cold outside. I'll stand it as long as I can. Couple things that originally I was going to talk about. You know, what education involves, or I guess basically sometimes during the day I'll have various subjects in my mind, and particular ones will make connections. And I'll probably title this video something like Pedagogy, which is the term that just came up out of the blue, which was basically the philosophy that deals with how to teach, how to properly teach, or teaching towards a particular end. And it related to what I was thinking this morning about heroes. And somebody was talking about role models in life. And I don't think about that very often, but when I do, I realize that, see, my father died when I was 15. And he got cancer when I was like 13 or 14. And it was pretty aggressive, so it was only like a year or two tops from the time he knew till he died, but he worked up till the end. So to me it was just kind of like an instant, there he was gone kind of thing. We'd had several experiences in our past where he'd take us camping, my brother and I, and you know, our family would go out to the high desert and go hiking. But besides that, I didn't really know a whole lot about my dad. I knew he liked going into the outdoors, and I knew he was a poet and he loved to write. And as I got older, I have a very strong love for the outdoors. I just love hiking and camping. And I also have a very interesting poetic side. I've written hundreds of poems. I should pull them out one day. But I haven't written poetry in a long time. Now I usually just write more factual stuff. I'm just not into fiction. I find poetry to be kind of like, you know, for me it's just wasteful time. I'd rather be writing interesting facts and things, you know. I have journals full of facts and figures, so I'm more of a researcher type. But through the years I've realized that there are different types of people. And there are some people who are just not research-minded, they're not learning-minded. And the more I learn about people's minds, the more I realize how we all play a different role. We really do, and our brains are actually structured differently, regardless of whether that's something that comes from, you know, the way that we're raised, the environment we're raised in, a combination of everything. Sometimes the questions just aren't, it doesn't matter why, it's just this is how it is. But I also believe that any person can learn and restructure their brain to fit just about anything. I believe that we're all artists in heart. I've been listening to this book this morning. I can't remember, Carol Dwight or something like that, but she wrote this book called Mindset, and it's an audiobook, and I've been listening to it for a few hours, or I was earlier, and talking about the way that we set ourselves up, and how she's taught so many classes where people, you know, there are two different kinds of people, you know. There are people who are learners, or I can't remember the term she was using, but the people who are fixed mindset, and the people who are growth mindset. That's what it is, fixed and growth. And the growth-minded people are able to keep learning, and it doesn't mean that everybody should keep learning, because some people aren't interested in learning things. But for me, learning helps me to understand my world better. So anyhow, back to role models. A lot of people have role models in their life who have taught them things. And whenever I think, well, my father died, and besides that, I never really had any males in my life. And perhaps that, you know, that contributes to my stubborn nature and my self-taught nature. And I don't really have anybody to give credit to, no guru or, you know. And that brings me to, right before I made this video, which I was watching a video, it was a Rupert Spira video, and I know a lot of people really like him. And it was talking about matter. What is matter? And I got about halfway through it, and I couldn't watch it. There's so much drivel in those types of philosophies for me now. It doesn't mean that I think that it's garbage or people shouldn't be interested. I think that it's fascinating stuff. But it reminds me of, like, you know, what if there's aliens? Or, you know, matter doesn't really exist. You know, about 15 years ago I read a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. Fascinating look, but that gave me a glimpse as to what they mean when they say matter doesn't exist, that it's really a hologram, that everything's really empty space, and has some really interesting, fascinating theories. But there's no conclusions to come to on that, because there's matter. I can feel it, I interact with it, and regardless of whether or not our minds can affect it, that doesn't mean we need to sit and debate whether matter is real or not, because it's as real as anything we know. And what I'm getting at with that is that there's some philosophies that are just pointless to me. They're deep philosophies. Like, one of those to me is that, you might want to understand the beginning of the universe, only because it helps you through the archetypal image and the as above, so below. If you understand the universe, you can understand yourself. But on the contrary, most ancient civilizations, that were into really spiritual practices, believed that if you knew your mind, then you could know the universe. But they were just as much into astrology and whatnot. But one of the things that she, that I got from listening to that audiobook was she was saying becoming is better than being. In other words, working towards your goal and doing something and having that satisfaction of doing it is better than having it. And I think we can all relate to that, kind of like when you go to the store and you buy something and it was more exciting to buy it than to have it. That's why sometimes I'll shop and just put stuff back, because I don't really buy much for myself, but I find the excitement isn't really ever having it. No amount of stuff makes us happy. But the idea of heroes and role models in teaching us when we're young, the pedagogy side of it, we can be very influenced by somebody that we highly revere and respect. So if we're at a young age and we learn something from somebody we respect, there's a certain nostalgia that comes with that. And I think we can all look back to our, say, teen years to something very nostalgic that we really remember. Maybe it was a childhood sports hero, maybe it was a movie star. And then later in life you find out, wow, this person wasn't as great as I thought they would, Or maybe the philosophy that I was taught wasn't that great by this person. And sometimes it's our own selves. We'll say, wow, the philosophy I taught myself was kind of BS, and we learn as we go. But the idea of being taught, by others is, it's what sets us off on the path of teaching ourselves. It's one of the most difficult things to discuss is education. Like I was talking with my mom earlier about, the school system, and a lot of people believe that the school system is what corrupts kids, but on the contrary, it also, I know people who dropped out in 6th grade, and I know the types of insight that they have about certain things. They're very intelligent people. It has nothing to do with schooling. Schooling doesn't determine your intelligence. But if they're lacking certain skills in mathematics or can't spell words correctly, it can affect their lives. And that's why it's such an important thing for people to realize that there's two sides to everything. School is a very important thing, it's a very useful thing, but it doesn't mean that the public school system works properly, because then we have teachers who might not even care. And then a lot of them do. I'm not saying teachers don't care. It's very frustrating. I know people who are involved in teaching kids, and they really love being around kids and teaching them, but they're trapped in a system that's just, it just puts money in the pockets of the administrators, and, it's hard to get away from greed and corruption. And maybe that's why I don't really have many heroes or role models, is because it seems like everybody's out to either get fame or fortune, recognition, profit. I'd say that Manly P. Hall, I wouldn't consider him a hero to me. I just think he was the most phenomenal modern philosopher that I know of, period. Then there's guys like, say, Alan Watts. I don't really look up to him because he was just another guy who kind of laughed through life, had his philosophies. I love the guy for who he is, but I feel like we're kind of on the same page. Instead of looking up to him, there are all a lot of interesting philosophies. Ram Dass, he was a great type guru type that I really enjoy his work, and I do look up to him in a way, but not enough to consider him really an idol or a role model. I can't think of anybody who I really admire, and that's kind of a tough thing, maybe that's kind of egocentric in a way. I don't know, but I don't think that I can really name too many people that I really admire for their work. And I wouldn't dare mention some of the people that I don't know personally. That's a hard one, A lot of people really like guys like, say, I would say Terence McKenna is up there, along with those lines. He was a very intelligent guy. And if all you're looking at is the psychedelic aspect of it, you're missing the whole point. If you think Terence McKenna and all you think of is psychedelics, That's not what he was about. He talked about all different types of things and had some fascinating ideas about life, but I don't agree with all of his theories either, or ideas. So maybe the idea of not having role models and idols is a matter of realizing that we're all on the same level and we all have a piece to contribute. But also maybe because I was deprived of that, during my teenage learning years, didn't really, I had to kind of teach myself. I was really into books and research, but not until I was out of high school. So I didn't even graduate high school. I was like a few credits short. And see, that's another thing, I'm actually pretty low on the totem pole of intellects, let's say, the people who call themselves intellects. The people who you see them write a blog and every other frickin' word is some like extremely long, complicated word. I used to be really into writing like that when I was younger, using the most complicated words that I could when I wrote. And it just hit me one day. If you can't speak on the layman level, the way that people generally speak in the real world, no matter how smart you are, nobody's going to want to listen to it. And I'm sure all of you have seen a comment that's like that on YouTube or elsewhere, where it's just, there's so many big words. It's not a matter of not understanding the words. It's a matter of seeing that the person seems like he has to express himself in such a complicated way instead of just using simple terms, because a person doesn't want to be seen as a simple person, simpleton. So when you put yourself in a category of intellects, it's kind of like, it's scoffable, it's not really, because then you can only associate with other intellects at that level. And, that's great for people who that's their thing. I'm fortunate to be a person who considers myself intelligent, educated to an extent, but not overly educated to where I can't associate and function in a group and morph and mold myself to fit the situation. Because life is complicated, and I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years. You could be the most wild mathematician in the land, and 10 years later be a farmer. I mean, we don't know where we're going as individuals. So we need to be pliable, which also means the kind of a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. But, and maybe that's why I feel the way I do about role models. I don't know. Anyhow, that book I'm listening to is fascinating, so I'll maybe post a description in the links or something here. Say goodbye, Juno. What's up, big guy?